BEPS has set new standards, which clearly it has, then bringing in more countries to those standards will ensure greater consistency.
Mike, good afternoon, and thank you so much for agreeing to spare this time with us today. The whole day that we spent today looking at a variety of things that got discussed, clearly BEPS was at the top agenda, and everybody was talking about action items, what does this mean, taxation of digital economy, and everything that's happening in and around there. And as somebody who's responsible for policy, I thought I'd ask you first as a question that what is the OECD doing currently as it goes on towards the implementation of the BEPS action items, and what more do we expect over the next 9 to 12 months?
Well, currently there is still some ongoing work to finish off bits of the BEPS project that needed to be left till now, like the work to determine the attribution of profits to dependent agent permanent establishments. But I think quite importantly the work is moving on to implementation, with the implementation framework and bringing more countries in. So, to the extent that BEPS has set new standards, which clearly it has, then bringing in more countries to those standards will ensure greater consistency.
And I agree with you. I mean, BEPS, so to say, seeks in some frame to have a universal tax code, and not exactly that way, but sort of some degree of consistency across countries, and that's very, very welcome. Where do you see the entire effort which is going on in terms of multilateral instrument?
Well, I think, why did we do BEPS? Because the public in many countries were very concerned about aggressive tax planning, about profits being shifted away from economic activities, and BEPS aims to solve that. But we have this big network of bilateral tax treaties, over 3,000 of them, and if they all had to be changed individually, then it would take many decades before the BEPS solutions were implemented, which would completely undermine the urgency with which we did the BEPS work. So the purpose of the instrument is to enable as many as possible of those treaties to be updated to reflect the BEPS outputs without the need for those bilateral negotiations. So it enables the changes to be reflected more quickly.
So one question which comes up is, we are looking at mandatory items, we are looking at items which are optional. How will a multilateral instrument which contains a number of things with which countries may or may not agree work out? So for example, India does not agree to international arbitration. If you wanted to put international arbitration into a multilateral treaty, India would have to carve out an exception. So how do you see this instrument come up?
Well, I think we need to divide the instruments articles into those bits that cover minimum standards, which everyone has signed up to, and other things like, as you rightly say, mandatory arbitration that not all countries have signed up to. And it seems to me, on the one hand, it's very hard to justify use of the instrument to do less than achieve the minimum standards. That's basically what it's there for. Equally, if we go to other areas like arbitration, then I think it's very hard to say that a country like India, that has never said it will do arbitration, is obliged to do arbitration when that's not part of the standard. But equally, there are other countries like the UK that do want to do arbitration, and by providing an optional provision, then it enables the countries that want to.
So you would have those as
yes.
optional articles, yes, which people may or may not agree to.
Yes. And by doing it like that, you should, I think, over time get greater consistency as well, because if more countries then want to opt into arbitration, they probably choose the provision in the instrument.
So two questions arise, and they are not necessarily policy framework, but sort of just asking you to do a crystal ball gazing as we go into the future. Once you look at an instrument to which everybody has signed up to, would there be an expectation that in interpretation of that instrument, authorities in the respective countries would really converge on the interpretation?
Well, I'm not sure that they will converge more than they converge currently on interpreting the big network of bilateral treaties, but on the other hand, the wording will, I think, over time become more standardized than in bilateral treaties. So perhaps to an extent, yes. At the moment, because all the bilateral treaties tend to be slightly different, if you get a legal interpretation of Treaty A, then someone will say, well, you might say it's the same in Treaty B, but the words are slightly different. By getting the words more aligned, then I think it will reduce that sort of debate.
And then over a period of time, hopefully even the judiciary will get aligned, because if you're interpreting the same set of wordings, whether it is judiciary in country X versus judiciary in country Y, they would sort of hopefully tend to converge and sort of therefore provide a better certainty to a taxpayer.
Yeah, I agree about that, although I'd not sort of overemphasise the role of the judiciary. Clearly their role is vital where there are disputes which can't otherwise be resolved, but most of the disputes about treaties are likely to be resolved by the competent authorities. And to that extent, having this clearer guidance, having a clearer framework should enable those to be resolved.
Final question, what's the current deadline date by which you expect the multilateral treaty to be in place?
Well, our mandate says that we have got to agree the instrument by the 31st of December. I'm quite confident now that we will do that. There's then the process of ratification, so I would expect that the instrument will be open for ratification sometime in 2017.
Perfect, good. Thank you so much. I appreciate your spending
Thank you.
time. Thank you.